Shalom, counties. I don't think that's going to catch on. Hello, my counting crows. Greetings, friends. It is I, your friendly neighborhood Rabbi John Carrier, and I am delighted to be counting the Omer with you in this final week of the Omer. It is almost Shavuot, and I hope you're making plans to join us for our Tikkun Leil Shavuot, which I'm calling Torah by Candlelight. We're going to have a brief festival Ma'ariv service, followed by, let's say, an intimate learning session. And in case you haven't gotten the email from the synagogue, I'm inviting people to send in questions that they've always wanted to ask a rabbi, but might have been afraid to ask. We've even sent out a link with an anonymous form that you can fill out so that if you want to ask a question and you don't even want me to know that it's you asking, you can still ask your question and I will answer it as best I can on Erev Shavuot. So if you haven't heard about this, check in with the PJTC office this week. You'll learn all about it, and I hope to see you there. But for right now, let's get on with counting the Omer. And this week, we are talking about the divine attribute of Malkhut. I shared with you yesterday that Malkhut is different from any of the other attributes we've studied so far, in that all of the other attributes emanate from God's presence, God's heavenly presence, but Malkhut emanates from God's worldly presence. That is, it is an attribute that emanates from God's creation when the creation reflects God's plan. And sometimes it doesn't, but when it does, it's magnificent. Usually this time of the week, I'm sharing with you a favorite story of mine that embodies the attribute we've been learning for the week. This time I'm going to do something a little different. This time I want to share with you a text from Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot, sometimes called the Ethics of the Fathers, I prefer the Sayings of the Sages, is a collection of aphorisms that came about when they were putting the Mishnah together, around 200 of the common areas, sort of 120 to 200 in that time period there. A lot of the other teachings of the rabbis fit into these categories, like how to say blessings and how to celebrate Shabbat and how to not eat cheeseburgers. And once they'd organized all the different rules that they had into their categories, there was a bunch of stuff left over that are just wise sayings. Sometimes I think of them as rabbinic fortune cookies. But by saying that, I don't want to diminish how valuable they've been in my life, just some really guiding ethical principles. And there's one in particular that attunes me to this idea of Malkhut, where the earth shines in a metaphysical sense when it is reflecting the emanation of God's intention. You can find this in any edition of Pirkei Avot. This Pirkei Avot is often in the back of a standard prayer book, so you can find it there. It's a great thing to read when you're not paying attention to prayers. Guilty. It's from chapter 2, Mishnah 4, and it goes a little something like this. Do God's will as though it were your own will, and God will do your will as if it were God's will. Nullify your will for God's will, and God will nullify others' will for yours. So there's a little bit to unpack here. There's a positive side, there's a negative side, but I want to sum up this way. The more your plans, your values, your habits are in alignment with the plans, the values, the habits that are embodied in Torah, the more successful you'll be. Further, if you take stock of your values and your habits and your actions, and you see that they are out of alignment, and then you change your plan, you sort of nullify what you were planning to do in order to be in better alignment with God's ideas, then if other people have plans that are going to circumvent your plans, your good plans that is, then God will set their plans aside. Again, a very complicated way of saying, if your motivations and intentions are out of alignment with, let's say, your highest ideals, then let's bring them together. And the closer you bring them together, the more successful you'll be. And I share this because this is a Mishnah that's stuck with me for a while now. Many times in my life, I've been frustrated, I've been unsuccessful, I've been stumbling in some way, often consistently. And I took a step back and looked at what I was planning, looked at what I was doing, and I said, okay, is this really in line with my values? Is this really in line with the Torah that I've learned? And if it's out of alignment, could that lack of alignment be why I keep stumbling? And I think many of us have the experience of being in a situation where things aren't unfolding the way we intended them to unfold, or the values being expressed in the work that we're involved in aren't entirely in line with our own values. The real is super far away from the ideal. And it's no big surprise when things don't work out or they feel painful or there's friction there. But I'm willing to bet you also have the experience where you're doing something and it's not just feels feels like the right thing to do in the moment, but if you reflect on it, is very much in alignment with your values. And those things tend to be more successful. And when they are successful, it feels like all the more worthy an accomplishment. So for me, this teaching captures the essence of the work I want to do this week together on Malkhut. That is, how do we take the ideal and the real and bring them closer together? Because that's where Malkhut emanates from the created realm. Thank you for listening to my favorite Malkhut stories/fortune cookie. We'll be talking much more about this idea of bringing things into alignment for the rest of the week. But first, don't forget to count day number 44 of the Omer after sundown tonight. And until next time, friends, peace.